Chapter 1. The Arrival. Blackwood was a town cloaked in mystery, a place where every whisper of the wind seemed to carry echoes of ancient secrets. Nestled between dense woods and rolling hills, its narrow cobblestone streets twisted like a labyrinth designed to confuse the uninitiated. The houses stood close together, their age-old facades weathered by time, and their windows seemed to watch with a quiet, knowing gaze. A thick fog often blanketed the town, blurring the lines between reality and illusion. When Ethan first arrived, the air was cold and damp, carrying with it a faint scent of pine and earth. He was immediately struck by the eerie charm of the place. A journalist by profession and a seeker of stories by heart, he had come to Blackwood in search of inspiration for his next big piece. The town's reputation for being haunted intrigued him. It was said that no one ventured out after sunset, not because of wild animals or thieves, but because of the night crawlers. According to local legend, the night crawlers were spectral figures that emerged after dusk. They were said to glide through the streets, their elongated forms shifting like shadows, and their presence was always accompanied by a chilling whisper. Some claimed they were the restless spirits of the town's ancestors, while others believed they were creatures born of darkness itself. But no one really knew the truth, and that was exactly what Ethan intended to uncover. He rented a small, creaky cottage on the edge of town. It was a quaint little place with ivy creeping up the stone walls and a fireplace that crackled with warmth. Despite its cozy appearance, the cottage felt strangely isolated, almost as if it existed outside the flow of time. At night, the silence was so deep that even the rustling of leaves sounded like whispers. Yet, Ethan found himself oddly at peace. There was a magnetic pull in the air, a feeling that Blackwood held stories waiting to be discovered. On his first evening, he visited the local pub, the Hollow Oak. The dimly lit tavern was filled with murmurs and cautious glances. When he asked about the night crawlers, the room fell silent. Eyes turned away, and conversations resumed in hushed tones. An elderly man, seated by the fireplace, finally spoke up. His voice was rough, layered with age and experience. "They protect us," he whispered, his eyes distant. "From what? I can't say, but they are not to be feared, not truly." Ethan's curiosity only grew. Protectors. How could spectral beings that inspired so much fear be guardians? The old man offered no more answers, but his words lingered in Ethan's mind. He felt a chill, not from fear but from the sense that the night crawlers were more than just folklore. There was a truth hidden beneath the layers of myth, and he was determined to find it. As the fog rolled in and the night deepened, Ethan stood at his window, staring into the misty streets. Shadows danced and twisted, forming shapes that almost looked alive. He wondered if the night crawlers were watching him, assessing him, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Little did he know that his arrival in Blackwood was not by chance. The night crawlers were real, and they had been waiting for him. Chapter 2. The Unseen. One crisp autumn evening, curiosity outweighed caution. The air was cool and tinged with the scent of fallen leaves. A silvery moon hung low in the sky, its light filtering through the mist like strands of gossamer. Ethan wrapped himself in a heavy coat and stepped out of his cottage, his breath visible in the cold night air. The streets were deserted, as they always were after sunset. Even the wind seemed to whisper in hushed tones, as if respecting the silent rule that governed Blackwood's nights. The ancient lampposts flickered faintly, their light struggling against the encroaching darkness. Yet, Ethan felt no fear, only a sense of anticipation, as if the town itself was holding its breath. He wandered through the winding alleys, his footsteps echoing softly on the cobblestones. Every corner seemed to hide a secret, every shadow threatened to come alive. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a flicker of movement, subtle but unmistakable. At first, it appeared as a mere shadow, dancing along the wall like a wisp of smoke. But then it grew, stretching into a tall, gaunt figure with limbs that seemed to flow rather than move. Its body shifted and shimmered, its form fluid and ever-changing. It moved with an otherworldly grace, gliding silently across the ground without disturbing a single leaf. Ethan's heart raced, yet he felt no urge to run. Instead, he was captivated, drawn to the creature by a force he couldn't explain. There was a strange calmness in its presence, a serenity that defied its eerie appearance. It turned its face toward him, and though its features were indistinct, he felt its gaze, ancient, knowing, and sorrowful. Without a word, the figure turned and drifted down a narrow passageway. Ethan followed, his instincts screaming at him to stop, but his feet moved of their own accord. The air grew colder, and the fog thickened, curling around him like ghostly tendrils. Yet, he pressed on, his curiosity overpowering his fear. The figure led him through a labyrinth of alleys and finally to an old, ivy-clad church on the outskirts of town. The building loomed before him, its Gothic architecture silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its broken stained glass windows stared down like hollow eyes, and the crumbling stone walls were covered in moss and vines. The air was heavy with an ancient energy, a power that resonated deep within Ethan's bones. The spectral figure glided toward the church entrance and paused, its form shimmering with a pale, ethereal light. It turned to face Ethan once more, and in that moment, he understood, it was inviting him inside, offering him a glimpse beyond the veil of reality. His pulse quickened, but he couldn't resist. This was what he had come to Blackwood for, to uncover the truth, to see the unseen. As he stepped over the threshold, the air grew colder still, and the world seemed to shift around him. Inside the dim sanctuary, shadows danced along the walls, twisting and writhing like living entities. The silence was profound, broken only by a faint humming sound, almost musical in nature. In the center of the nave, bathed in a soft, otherworldly glow, stood the spectral figure, waiting patiently. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was no mere ghost story. The night crawlers were real, and he was standing at the threshold of their world. His journey had only just begun. Chapter 3. The Revelation. Inside the ancient church, the air was heavy with an indescribable energy, as if time itself moved differently within its walls. Dust motes danced in the dim light that filtered through broken stained glass windows, casting fragmented hues of red and blue on the cold stone floor. Ethan stood motionless, his heart pounding as he watched the spectral figure, its form shimmering with an ethereal glow. The figure's eyes glowed softly, reflecting a sorrow as ancient as the stones surrounding them. Its presence was powerful yet gentle, and when it spoke, its voice was like a whisper carried on a night breeze, calm, soothing, and deeply resonant. "Do not fear," it began, its words echoing softly in the vast sanctuary. "I am one of the night crawlers, a guardian of Blackwood. We are not the monsters they fear. We are protectors, born of sacrifice." Ethan's pulse quickened, his journalistic instincts screaming to document every word. But in that moment, he felt more than a mere observer. He was a participant in a truth that transcended time. The spectral being moved gracefully across the nave, its form flowing like mist. With a gentle wave of its elongated arm, the air around them shimmered, and suddenly, the church seemed to come alive. Shadows shifted, taking on forms and shapes, transforming into vivid images. Ethan saw visions of Blackwood as it once was, thriving, vibrant, and full of life. But then, darkness descended. A malevolent force, formless and ancient, spread through the town like a plague, consuming light and hope. People cried out in despair as shadows twisted and contorted, taking monstrous shapes that feasted on fear and sorrow. His heart sank as he watched the town's descent into chaos. But then, he saw them, a group of brave souls who stepped forward, their faces resolute, their spirits unyielding. The night crawlers. They were ordinary men and women once, bound by love for their home and each other. Faced with an unstoppable darkness, they made an unimaginable choice. They sacrificed their mortal lives, the Guardian explained, its voice tinged with quiet sorrow. To become something more, their essence was bound to the night, transforming them into guardians who could walk the veil between light and shadow. Ethan watched as the spectral figures battled the darkness, their forms glowing with an ethereal light that repelled the monstrous shadows. They moved with elegance and precision, their unity forming an impenetrable shield that pushed the darkness back. It was a war waged in silence, unseen and unknown to the very people they protected. The Church, the Guardian continued, is a nexus of mystical energy. It is here that we draw our strength, maintaining the balance between the darkness that hungers and the light that endures. Ethan's eyes widened as the realization sank in. The night crawlers were not harbingers of doom. They were unsung heroes who kept an ancient evil at bay, ensuring that Blackwood's people could live in peace, even if it meant living in fear of the very beings who protected them. The visions faded, and the sanctuary returned to its cold, dim reality. The Guardian's glow softened, and it looked at Ethan with a kindness that belied its spectral form. "You were meant to see this," it whispered. "You were meant to carry this truth." Ethan felt his chest tighten, a mixture of awe, sadness, and purpose swelling within him. The night crawlers had sacrificed everything, and no one knew. It was up to him to change that. But before he could speak, the air grew cold, and a sinister whisper echoed through the ancient halls. The shadows around them began to writhe, and the Guardian's gentle expression turned to one of fierce determination. "The darkness is stirring," it said gravely. "The battle is far from over." Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The temperature plummeted, and an icy wind howled through the shattered windows, extinguishing what little light remained. The sanctuary grew dim as shadows coiled and surged like a living tide, oozing from every crack and crevice. A malevolent presence seeped into the air, thick and suffocating, its malice palpable. Ethan's body tensed, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his feet were rooted to the ground. The Guardian stood tall, its form radiating with a fierce, luminous energy. "It is time," it declared, its voice resonant and commanding. From the darkness, a shape began to form, twisted and formless, its edges constantly shifting. Eyes like burning coals glared at Ethan with an intensity that froze his blood. It was the manifestation of ancient evil, the very force the night crawlers had sworn to contain. Its presence radiated pure malice, an insatiable hunger for despair. The guardian stepped forward, its aura intensifying into a radiant shield. It moved with a grace that defied the physical world, every motion fluid and deliberate. The air crackled as the two forces met, the light of the guardian and the darkness of the ancient entity. Suddenly, from the shadows, more figures emerged. At first, they appeared as elongated silhouettes, but as they stepped into the faint light, Ethan recognized them, the night crawlers. They glided silently, their spectral forms shimmering as they took their places alongside the guardian. Their presence was solemn, unwavering, and their faces, though ghostly, bore expressions of fierce determination. A chorus of whispers echoed through the sanctuary, an ancient chant that reverberated through the stone walls, vibrating with power. The night crawlers raised their arms in unison, and beams of ethereal light shot forth, weaving together into a lattice of radiant energy that surrounded the encroaching darkness. The shadows writhed and hissed, their forms contorting as they fought against the light. The malevolent entity roared, its sound an unearthly cacophony that shook the very foundations of the church. It lunged at the barrier, its dark tendrils lashing out, seeking to consume the light. Ethan watched in awe and terror as the spectral guardians stood firm, their luminous forms flickering under the assault. The battle was both beautiful and terrifying, a dance of light and shadow, of hope and despair. The air pulsed with energy, the very fabric of reality bending under the clash of opposing forces. The guardian's voice cut through the chaos, strong and unwavering. "We fight not for ourselves, but for the light that still lives within them," it declared, its gaze shifting to Ethan. "Your world depends on this balance. You must remember." As the entity's darkness pressed against the radiant shield, Ethan felt a surge of resolve. The guardian's words ignited something within him, a spark of courage, of purpose. He realized that the battle was not just for Blackwood, but for every light threatened by darkness. With a fierce cry, the guardian unleashed a wave of blinding light, its power surging through the sanctuary. The night crawlers followed suit, their combined energy forming a barrier so brilliant that the shadows shrieked and recoiled. The malevolent entity roared in defiance, its form disintegrating as the light consumed it. The darkness shattered, retreating into the void with a final, agonized wail. The sanctuary was flooded with light, the ancient evil banished once more. As the brilliance faded, the night crawlers began to shimmer, their forms growing faint, translucent. Their duty fulfilled, they were returning to the veil. Ethan felt a lump in his throat, an overwhelming gratitude and sorrow mingling within him. The guardian turned to him, its eyes gentle once more. "Our battle is eternal, but your world is safe, for now." And with that, they were gone, leaving behind a silence that echoed with their sacrifice. Chapter 5. The Aftermath. The first light of dawn seeped through the shattered stained glass windows, casting faint hues across the cold stone floor of the ancient church. The air was still, heavy with the echoes of a battle fought beyond mortal understanding. Ethan stood alone in the silent sanctuary, his heart pounding as he tried to grasp the magnitude of what he had witnessed. The night crawlers were gone, their spectral forms having faded into the early morning mist. Yet their presence lingered, a whisper in the air, a faint glow that clung to the ancient stones. The memory of their sacrifice and courage hung heavy in the atmosphere, a sacred testament to their eternal vigil. Ethan's legs felt weak, and he sank to his knees, his fingers brushing the cold floor where the spectral guardian had stood. A wave of emotion crashed over him, grief for the fallen heroes, awe at their selflessness, and gratitude for their protection. He understood now that they were not the monsters of local lore, but noble spirits who sacrificed everything to shield Blackwood from a darkness the world could never comprehend. His mind replayed the images he had seen, the faces of the night crawlers, etched with determination and sorrow, their silent battle waged each night to preserve the light. He saw the darkness they had fought, a force so ancient and malevolent that it defied explanation, a void that hungered for despair and destruction. And he remembered the Guardian's words, resonating with quiet authority, "Your world depends on this balance. You must remember." Ethan knew his life could never be the same. He had been chosen to witness this truth, to bear the weight of a story that transcended myth and reality. But with that knowledge came a choice, a crossroads between two destinies. From the stillness, the Guardian's form reappeared, more translucent than before, its glow soft and melancholy. It approached him with a grace that defied the physical world, its presence soothing and ancient. "You have seen what lies beyond the veil," it spoke, its voice like the whisper of wind through autumn leaves. "You understand the burden we carry, the sacrifice we endure." Ethan nodded, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "I do. And I want to help. I want to honor your story, to tell the world who you really are." The Guardian's gaze softened. "Then you must choose. Join us in our eternal vigil, to walk the night as a protector, unseen and unsung, or return to your world, to chronicle our legacy and ensure that the truth endures. Both paths require sacrifice. Both serve the light." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. To join them, to become a night crawler, meant surrendering his mortal life, to exist as a guardian bound to the night, forever battling the darkness. It was a noble purpose, an honor beyond measure. But it also meant leaving behind his humanity, his voice, his words. His eyes fell to his notebook, the pages filled with scribbled notes, half-formed thoughts, and fragments of truth. He had come to Blackwood searching for a story, and he had found one far greater than he could have ever imagined. A story of sacrifice, of courage, of light battling darkness. A story that needed to be told. "I can't let your memory fade into legend," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "People need to know the truth. They need to understand the courage it takes to protect them from the shadows." The Guardian's form flickered, its expression serene and understanding. "Then that is your path. Carry our story with you, so that even if we are forgotten, our purpose will endure." Ethan stood, his resolve hardening. "I swear it. I will write your story, share your legacy. Blackwood will remember." The Guardian's glow intensified, a gentle warmth that enveloped Ethan, filling him with a sense of peace and purpose. "Then our duty is fulfilled," it whispered. "Go now, and light the way with your words." With that, the Guardian's form began to fade, its essence dispersing like mist in the morning light. Ethan watched as it dissolved, its glow merging with the dawn that crept through the stained glass. The ancient church fell silent once more, its secrets now entrusted to a man who had seen beyond the veil. Ethan walked out of the church, the early sun warming his face. The cobblestone streets of Blackwood lay quiet, unaware of the battle that had raged mere hours before. The town appeared peaceful, ordinary, oblivious to the guardians who patrolled the shadows to keep them safe. He looked back at the ivy-clad church, its ancient stones standing firm against the ravages of time. He knew he would never see the night crawlers again, not as they were. But he could feel their presence in the whisper of the wind, the play of shadows, the lingering aura of light that guarded the town. Ethan returned to his rented cottage, his mind racing with words and images, his heart heavy with responsibility. He sat at his desk, pen poised over paper, and began to write. He wrote of heroes who sacrificed everything to fight a darkness the world could not see. He wrote of their courage, their sorrow, their eternal vigil. He wrote to ensure they would never be forgotten. As the sun climbed higher, bathing Blackwood in golden light, Ethan's story took shape. A chronicle of the night crawlers, guardians of the Vale, protectors of a delicate balance between light and shadow. In the years that followed, Ethan's chronicle became more than just a story. It became a legend, a testament to hope and sacrifice. The people of Blackwood read his words, shared his tale, and found comfort in the knowledge that they were never truly alone in the dark. Late at night, when the fog rolled through the narrow streets and the lampposts flickered softly, Ethan would sometimes pause and listen. In the whisper of the wind, he could still hear the silent guardians who roamed the night, their presence an invisible shield against the darkness. And in those quiet moments, he would smile, knowing that the light always endures, even beyond the veil. Epilogue. Years passed, and the legend of the night crawlers became woven into the fabric of Blackwood's identity. No longer feared as malevolent spirits, they were honored as protectors, silent guardians who walked the shadows to defend the light. Ethan's chronicle had achieved what he had promised the Guardian. The truth had been preserved, their legacy secured. His book, Guardians of the Vale, became a cherished story throughout the town and beyond. People whispered its tales by fireside, shared its pages by candlelight, and found solace in the knowledge that unseen heroes watched over them. Visitors came to Blackwood to walk its cobblestone streets, to see the ancient church that still stood on the outskirts, shrouded in ivy and mystery. Ethan remained in Blackwood, unable to leave the place that had changed him so profoundly. He continued to write, documenting the whispers of legends that only grew richer with time. But he never forgot his first encounter with the night crawlers, nor the promise he had made to honor their sacrifice. On quiet nights, when the moon hung low and the mist curled through the narrow alleys, Ethan would wander the familiar streets, his senses attuned to the shadows. He could feel them, even if he could no longer see them, the guardians who walked the Vale, whose silent vigil protected the sleeping town. One night, as autumn leaves danced in the cold breeze and the fog lay heavy on the ground, Ethan found himself standing before the ancient church once more. Its stones were weathered, its stained glass shattered, but the air around it still hummed with a quiet, sacred power. He stepped inside, his footsteps echoing through the empty sanctuary. Dust motes hung in the silvered moonlight, undisturbed by time. Ethan stood in the very spot where the Guardian had once spoken to him, where light and darkness had clashed in a battle unseen by mortal eyes. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of memories press upon him, the flicker of spectral light, the whisper of ancient chants, the fierce determination in the eyes of the night crawlers. A chill ran down his spine, followed by a warmth that flooded his chest, filling him with a profound sense of peace. A faint glow illuminated the nave, soft and shimmering, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan saw them. The night crawlers stood in silent formation, their luminous forms blending with the mist. Their faces were serene, their presence gentle. At their center stood the Guardian, its eyes glowing with the same ageless wisdom Ethan remembered. The Guardian's gaze met his, a quiet gratitude shining within its spectral depths. It did not speak, Yet Ethan heard its voice as clearly as if it were whispering in his ear. "You kept your promise. Our story will live on." Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he watched the figures grow fainter, their forms melding with the light of dawn that crept through the broken windows. One by one, they turned and glided toward the far wall, their forms dissolving into the shadows from which they were born. The guardian lingered a moment longer, its eyes softening as it offered him a final nod of respect. Then, it too faded into the veil, the light of its essence merging with the morning mist. The sanctuary fell silent, empty once more, but Ethan no longer felt alone. The guardians were still there, watching, protecting, forever bound to the shadows, forever preserving the light. Ethan stepped out of the church as the sun began to rise, bathing Blackwood in a golden glow. The town lay peaceful, oblivious to the battle that had been fought for their safety, to the guardians who walked the darkness to keep the light alive. He looked back at the ancient church, a soft smile playing on his lips. The legend of the night crawlers would continue to be told, not as monsters or phantoms, but as heroes, eternal sentinels who patrolled the Vale to safeguard hope. Ethan walked back through the cobblestone streets, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He knew that one day, his own story would end, but the legacy of the night crawlers would live on. As long as people believed in the light that endures, the guardians would never truly be gone. That night, as the stars emerged and the shadows lengthened, a whisper danced through the wind, gentle and reassuring, a promise that even in the darkest of nights, the light would always guide them home.